to record this video a couple of times now, and every time it doesn't come out exactly as I want it to, so I'm going to keep this one short and sweet and not digress too much. So basically, I read like 28 books, I think, this year, and I'm going to go over some of my favorites, sort of just as recommendations. These are not reviews. I'm just putting them here so that if someone is looking for book recs, they have a place to start. So I'll begin with a couple of books that I don't have physically present with me. Actually, 3 books that are on my favorites list, I suppose, and that I want to give mention to, but I had either gotten them from a library or read a PDF. The first is Genome by Matt Ridley, which is a book from the late 90s where he basically just takes you through what we knew so far about DNA. And obviously that was at the very beginning of DNA research and starting to understand the genome, and still there was just so many things that blew my mind in that book. I mean, these are things that are hidden deep inside of us, that we just don't readily know about until science makes them known to us. I was curious about genetics and DNA, and that was a really, really sufficient, quick run through for someone who is not that familiar on the subject. However, it is outdated, and I should probably read a more modern update on what we know about genetics. Next is Kafka on the Shore, which is the first Murakami book I've read. I think it succeeds very well in doing what it's trying to achieve, assuming that what I took away from it is what he wanted to achieve anyways. But even if not, I got some very valuable insights from it. It's entertainment, but while also trying to be poetic. It's a solid novel for sure. And then the third one that I don't have physically present before me is the Dhammapada, which is a collection of aphorisms accredited to the Buddha, which of course is not very likely the case. But that is a pretty solid foundation on testing the ideas of Buddhism and asceticism within the self. I mostly would read that one in fragments because, of course, they are aphorisms. I would read a few at a time. I usually I had the PDF on my phone, and I would read them at the gym or if I was in a waiting room or something somewhere. And, within a month I had read all 400 of them. And I don't necessarily recommend it as a read, but it is a pretty cool starting point. And whether you like it or not, the whole time that you're reading it, you're testing the truth in your own life. You're testing whether or not these things are valid in your opinion. So it's pretty cool. Following up on the Dhammapada, I also read a couple of simple mindfulness books this year by some Western teachers, I suppose, Pema Chodron and Thich Nhat Hanh. True Love is a simple 102-page little take on basically how to be there for those we love simply by being present. It's straightforward, but it really becomes a part of you while you read it. And if you read these lessons and you find yourself in them, I think they will certainly help you become that person that you want to be, being present for friends, family, and even for yourself. And then Pema Chodron, this one I specifically recommend. This is called Comfortable with Uncertainty. It's 108 lessons. Most of them are about a page or a page and a half. All right, I had to wait for a helicopter to pass. But yeah, I recommend that you read this one slowly and really practice these lessons and let them become a part of you. Don't just rush through it. Treat every page as though it were important. It took me a while to read this one, just because it is, like I said, it's 108 teachings, and I was really trying only to read 3 of them a day max. Otherwise, you're not really getting anything out of them if you're not allowing yourself to practice them. Next, I've got a couple by Hermann Hesse, which, in my opinion, these 2 novels basically serve the same function. He takes you through a series of analyses of the self and experience. Although I will say, Damien is more about idols and how we follow them, and Siddhartha is more about the introspective internal ideals that govern us. I think the end result of each novel is basically the same. It's basically a tornado of ideas where in 150 pages he tries to take you through something that most novels will take you through over the course of 500 or 600 pages. In fact, I think these are more, in terms of what they try to accomplish and how many things they try to accomplish in such a short amount of time, they are incredibly ambitious. And so I think they fall flat of being really top-tier novels for me. They try to do too much with too little, whereas I think there are certain ideas that you could probably take 2 or 3 ideas from Siddhartha, or even just the single main point of Damien, and explore them over the course of 300 or 400 pages and really flesh them out much better. They're basically crash courses, but I still highly recommend them, especially if you don't read much. I think, honestly, Damien is a fantastic novel. If you're curious about the idea of both religious and personal idols, and how we kind of try to transcend ourselves to become something greater. And then Siddhartha more for simple ideas regarding samsara and the role it plays in our lives. I read the Tao Te Ching during the summer when I first started getting curious about religion, which is thanks to one of the books that I'll later discuss. This is basically the formative text on Taoism in general, written by Lao Tzu. Beautiful book, short, sweet, succinct. In the first section, we learn that the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. So right off the bat, we have an understanding of what Taoism is, in that it is trying to reach ideas which cannot be properly described through language. So we're kind of free right off of the bat. This is not something that is telling you that if you do not listen to it, then you will be rejected, or that if you do not follow its rules, then there's something inherently wrong with you. He does not propose that the Tao is God, but rather tries to describe the very essence of things in a way that the human brain can understand it. And through reading it, I will say I definitely unconsciously assigned some of these passages to myself, these ideas of this sort of eternal energy and force that is always going to be there and that we have always recognized. And even if we look back to our childhood, the descriptions of the energy that is described here, I think we know that it's always been there. It's not necessarily God, like I said, but it's just sort of this basic life force that I think is universally identifiable. A lot of it is kind of character assessment. It is their teachings on how to be one with the Tao as opposed to resisting the Tao. But again, the book never threatens you and says that if you don't follow its rules, then you'll burn in eternal damnation. So if you're looking for a very earthly spirituality and something that does not make grandiose claims, this might be a good place to start. Next is John Williams, Stoner. Beautiful novel. I had heard of this before I was even into reading. Several years ago, I was on IMDb and I saw that a film of this title was in production or something of that sort. That film, as far as I know, is completely dead, and it could be made eventually, but as of yet, it's not even being made. But when I read the description of it, it had always stuck with me, and it sounded like something that if I ever did want to start reading, that I would read. And so I finally got around to it this year, and this is one of those rare works of art where I've never heard anyone diss it or say anything bad about it, and it certainly holds true to that ideal. It's not very long. It's 270 pages, where John Williams basically takes us through the life of a young man who was he grew up in the early 1900s in a family of farmers, just him and his parents living on a farm and barely scraping by. And then at the advent of the local university, a recruiter came by and basically said, like, hey, we're looking for young people to come to the university. And William Stoner becomes a student. And I don't want to spoil anything because even though it is about pretty mundane events, the experience of going through this novel is beautiful and mysterious, not narratively, but just in sort of what life has to offer for us. I will say it was not a super emotional read, which is of course fine, but admittedly when trying to find something from the book to talk about for this video, I flipped and found a random page. It was the end of page 24 here, which I think is the first chapter. So I read the end of chapter 1 again after not having opened this book for probably, let's see, it's January 7th or so, and I read this in September, so it's been like 4 months. And I read just the end of one chapter, and I was so moved, almost to tears pretty much. And it just reminded me of how many sections of this book just perfectly understand and encapsulate the experience of being in the world and yet feeling as though we're only within ourselves. And I wouldn't say that that's the focus of the novel, but that's my main takeaway of it. It is very introspective, but luckily I prefer this actually is an introspective novel that's written in the third person, because first person introspective novel sometimes gets a little bit annoying, just ends up feeling a bit like a diary, which I'm okay with as well, but this was really nice for a change. So yeah, this is a book that I highly recommend anyone read, no matter who you are, how old you are, where you come from. I highly recommend this. I think next I will go with the mammoth of the Recognitions, which thus far is the longest a book has ever taken me to read. I spent exactly 3 months reading this sucker, taking it around with me, various places, and eventually meeting its end. It was difficult. It was sometimes a headache, but I never once considered giving up on it because I knew that the ideas being formulated here were things that I had to see out. And when it is difficult and when it is tough, it's not because it's a bad book, of course. It's because William Gaddis is just working on another level here. He's operating completely in his own form. He does not give two shits about what you expect a novel to be. He simply spent, close to a decade composing what he believed was his masterwork, the best possible thing that he could muster. And I don't think he compromised at all. I doubt that at any point in this novel he really compromises and does what you want him to do or what a publisher might want him to do. He simply is marching to the beat of his own drum, for lack of a better way to say it. Major takeaways from this novel is that if you do undergo it, you will likely go down hundreds of rabbit holes, mostly regarding religion and the history of Christianity, because he makes so many references that you end up, or at least I ended up, going online. And of course I used the williamgaddis.org, the notes provided by Stephen Moore, which is great. Basically a series of annotations to help you go along with the book, because it is incredibly dense. The references are everywhere, and most of them, if you don't have a seriously comprehensive understanding of some of these topics, then things can get a little bit tough. But anyways, this is a novel where you wait and wait and wait for beautiful things to happen, because he uses language so beautifully that you kind of, you're simply awaiting for him to be optimistic and really just start to give you what it is that you desire as a reader. And personally, I wouldn't really say that he ever does. What he does give you, though, are these pretty lovely sections where finally characters do start speaking their mind. There's also these awesome sections, which I don't know if you can tell, but so here's the regular text in the book, and these sections here are much smaller because these are in the form of a letter. And he does this 2 or 3 times in the novel, where finally he digresses from that style that he keeps and holds to for the entire book, which is pretty much just third person, linear. in what is a maximalist novel, he never diverges except for in a couple of spots from his form. I was expecting something that was a play on form, but really, in terms of structure, the novel is pretty straightforward. And I would say that was probably a little bit difficult for me because I was, having read Infinite Jest the previous year, I was expecting something along those lines where every few dozen pages or so, he might be looking at things from a different character's perspective or utilizing different forms of telling the story. But he really doesn't. He pretty much sticks to a singular form. I could probably make a whole video on this, but even now just talking about it, nothing I'm saying really does the experience of reading it any justice. And I'm struggling to sort of say anything useful about it. You really do just have to read it if it's something that's piqued your interest. My curiosity was drawn to it by Leaf because he spoke so highly of it. And I think as soon as I got the idea in my head that I wanted to read it, there was no going back. And like I said, it took me 3 months. I started on September 15th. I finished it December 15th. I don't regret it at all. I do wish I was a faster reader, but I did it. And I will certainly be retracing the mysteries that exist in this text probably for the rest of my life. I don't want to spoil anything, but read it. I think it's a little bit unfortunate that Alan Watts has become just a YouTube thumbnail, because I don't think I ever would have sought his work out on my own. I had a friend recommend this to me. I didn't actually read this edition. I got a copy from the library. It's an orange edition. I don't know who the publisher is. This one I just got on eBay so I could keep it on my favorites desk, or my favorite shelf, because I know that I will absolutely be returning to it, probably sooner rather than later. The premise is simple. Alan Watts is composing a series of thoughts to give to, for example, his kids, or anyone coming into the world, so that people who are confused of what to make of the world from a religious and philosophical perspective have a place to start. And that's why it's basically just called The Book. It is the starting place, in his opinion, if you're trying to make up your mind about things. It was almost as if my religious perspectives were reset. He doesn't really give you beliefs, but he peels your own biases back just enough so that if you want, you can kind of reset. And I would say, for me personally, I have a very short attention span, so the only difficulty in reading it was that the chapters are very long. I mean, they're not super long, but example, this section, chapter 3 starts on page 53, and it runs all the way to page, this is 86. There's over 30 pages for a chapter, and the ideas are dense in that I know for a fact that these chapters are going to be best consumed in one sitting, but I just didn't have the patience to, or maybe not even so much the patience, but he gives you these important snippets that then I want to go out and live and explore in the world and test them for myself, so I have to stop reading. To me, the main takeaway is this idea that the only thing that truly separates you in any way from the external world is your ego, and even that is a synthetic part of the whole that composes who you are. Finally, number 1, I have tried recording the snippet for this book many times now, and nothing I can say or do will do it any justice, so I will simply introduce this as one of my favorite novels that I've read thus far, which, granted, I haven't read a ton of novels. I really only started reading a lot in 2020, but this one has it all in there. This is probably going to be one of the fictional texts I return to the most throughout the next decade or so, maybe even throughout the rest of my life. It's all in here, and it's almost perfectly done, and that is Brothers Karamazov. Well, this edition is called the Karamazov Brothers, but it's the Brothers Karamazov. I mean, it's basically perfect. Few other works of fiction, whether film or literature, really dig into the topics and issues of morality, especially as they pertain to God and religion. I wasn't even going into this book looking for something regarding religion. I was literally just intrigued by Dostoevsky after having read Notes from Underground. And for some reason, I started here. I didn't start at Crime and Punishment or The Idiot. I started here. And I'm actually glad I did, because I would rather have read this now in my early 20s than have put it off for another decade, because I really appreciate it. And I actually can't wait to read it again, because I'm sure there are so many things that I missed just because on first go I wasn't really sure what I was getting into. So yeah, Brothers Karamazov, awesome.